everyone, welcome back to PommyInOz. Hope we're all doing really well. If you are new around here, please drop a like, please drop a subscribe. It does mean the world to the channel. We're smashing them out. We're nearly at 2,300, so if we can hit that by the end of the day, 2 of you subscribe, that'd be grouse. A staggering 42% of you are subscribed, so if you've got 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1, turn that notification on, subscribe and hit that like button. If you are a returning PommyInOzer, good day to you. How are you doing? And you can become a member of the channel. Link is in the description of that. We've just hit the button. Big congratulations to Shan Gore. You may know her from the Blue Abroad AFLW show. I'm constantly a guest on that. We are sponsoring her. She is playing for the Bullants, and she's the captain of that side. So we have acquired her. So welcome to the team. We also sponsored Domaku. So if that interests you, get involved. Every little bit of helps, as the old lady said, as she pissed into the sea. So without any further ado, Carlton come off a 48-point win to the Crows. So we're going to do the review, and then we're going to look into it. And I think one thing for me, if you take anything out of this video before we get to your fan questions, is the 50 points from stoppage, the 13 points from centre clearances. But the big one for me, over 50 points from defensive half chains, 44 of them were turnovers or intercepts. That is our highest of the year, and after a lot of talk in the press that Carlton don't score from turnover, don't score from transition, they're one-dimensional, for the second week in a row we had a large part of our points made up from that. And when you look at the personnel that is missing in that, where we all talked about Mitch McGovern, that is a huge turnaround and something that we really need to staple it. And how has that happened? Well, one thing, and we'll get into it in more detail in your questions because a lot of them are out there, is our willingness to get it away from the contest now. Carlton have just hit the lead in uncontested possessions, and that is huge. What Carlton now are doing is they've got that ability to work the space, win the tough ball, win the hard, grindy type ball, which is synonymous with sides that are building something, and then hit the outside. And that is largely in part to the players that are playing on the wing. We have a massive rotation now. We're starting to see a rotation in game, particularly around stoppages. It's a lot different personnel there, which keeps them fresh and hungry. You're seeing Vossi now focus his core personnel in them centre clearances, but around stoppages, it could be anyone. We've seen down the back, Whittaker now taking the hit-outs down the back, Lewis Young going down the back as the acting ruckman, and Carlton working the personnel around there and keeping their key cogs ahead of the ground, particularly Cripps. You've started to see Cripps, particularly in the defensive half stoppages, work a little bit up the ground, so he's the outlet ball, and they're getting the ball there. And we're starting to see this nice hitting the corridor, then hitting it out wide. Carlton attacked the wing more times this game than they have done in any other games previously. And that is a huge statement of intent. That is now starting to build a complete game plan. And we said this will take time. People have got to remember, when we're talking about percentages and stuff like that, they're secondary. Results are first. And they are going from a system that was very centralised, very long ball focused, very kick focused, to a new style, and it's starting to bear some fruit. And what is important is you look at some of the other teams that came out of the blocks, firing your pies and teams like that. Carlton have remained consistent and add layers every week. At the moment, this is something that we really need to focus on as the team progresses. They're starting to get that overlap run. And that is something that really impressed me in that, the overlap run, the amount of times that our players, because we've got real good players at riding tackles, we're starting to take them tackles and hold on to the ball a bit longer, bob the handball out, you're in space, you're in free traffic, and that is why Carlton's uncontested possession count is getting higher. We're very fortunate that we have bigger bodies and real tricky customers to really go ahead and really get against the grain. So for me, that is something that is really exciting, and this was a real complete performance, particularly the 74 inside 50s. A lot of people who I've talked to have said that Carlton kind of overuse the ball when they don't get it in enough. I want to see this because our forward line works very efficiently at locking it in and recycling it. And a lot of these 74, about 30 of them were recycled inside 50s where we've actually forced the issue. And that is why Carlton were real high. If If you watch Adelaide, a lot of times they were under that pressure kick, and it was like watching us when we're bad, bombing it out, and the repeat entries, a few of them entries as well, where Whittaker took the mark about 70 out and gets the ball back in, and they play it in with purpose, and that is a big thing. There was purpose in our movement all the time, and we can look at the fourth and say, okay, we slowed down, but I don't see there is any benefit in going hard and smashing a team. Round 8, something Goodwin said after the Melbourne game when St Kilda came back into the game to an extent, it's round 8. Do you know what I mean? There's bigger fish to fry, there's bigger teams to knock off when it counts. So Carlton under an injury crisis at the moment. Can you imagine if they went hard to get the 100-point win? Someone did a hammy, someone did an injury. It's mental. Sometimes you've got to do enough, and a 48, 50-point win is a hiding in this game. And the boys never looked threatened in that fourth, and that's through the labour of the work. And what I am really impressed about this week was the control element. There was really a second, third, fourth, fifth gear. You actually saw it for the first time, and I can't remember when I've seen that from a Carlton side. And now it's over at GWS, who are a lot more controlled, a lot more battle-hardened, but definitely vulnerable, with a lot of bad memories for Carlton. And this is the template. This template wins 9 out of 10 games that you play, if you can match it every week for the intensity. So credit to the boys. They're flying, they're rolling at the moment. It's going to get tougher now. These next 5 games are really interesting because there's a myriad of styles for Carlton, ending with the Richmond game, which they've now got the wood on, recent wood, so that'll make them feel good. So it's a real nice fixture list because you've got GWS, then you've got Sydney, and then you've got Pies. Do you know what I mean? You've got them wonderful myriads there where the levels go up, and then there's a chance to readdress and change your situation for the Pies to go on to the Richmond game, which I think is really good because we've got to see a bit of diversity in this side, and we're starting to see it, and that makes me really excited. So they're my thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a real complete performance. The boys look good. They work it. I was really impressed as well with TDK falling behind the ball this week. That is key. He alleviated, and I said it in my preview, he's going to have a big job on Tex. And from the second, he started to go away from the contest and oscillate outside D60 in about 60 metres behind the defensive, 10 metres behind the defensive 50. So I call it D60 there. That is our problem area where teams kill us on the transition. He was that body, and that's where these high forwards really like to hurt Carlton. That's that entry point inside 50. And Max Gawn, probably the best in the league at that. It was great to see TDK in there. A lot of spoils there, a lot of awkwardness. Doesn't have to take the marks, has to make it awkward. And it allowed Carlton to defend that area really well. A lot of score launches were from Adelaide because of the nature of the beast. Carlton were dominant in the forward half of the ground. So that was the only place they could get the ball. Having that there as the security blanket, it's going to win you games. And as he grows into that role, I think TDK could be a real cornerstone of what Carlton are building. So let's get into your questions. Some really good ones this week. I can't wait to show you them all. So that's the wrap then. Thank you very much. Make sure you do like, subscribe, do all that wonderful stuff. Give it a share around. If you want to become a member, link is in the description. I'll see you tomorrow because we've got a bit of a change around with the lateness with Telstra's internet issues. But until next time, as always, it's a pleasure. Stay safe. Pom out. So Stephen and Mitchell ask a similar question. This is very picky because I love the way we're playing, but teams scoring very easy goals out the back, outnumbering in D50. Is it a consequence of high press, or is it a structural breakdown? Good question. Do you think this team still transitioned too easily out of our forward 50? Well, I mean, let's take a look. So if we bring up this here, now what you've got here is the red here. That is Carlton play a real high press. And what you find genuinely is because we had so many 74 inside 50s, it's always going to put pressure on that. But teams look to hit this corridor here. And you find when they get to this stage, which is common, do you know what I mean? You're always in a pressure. But this is the problem kick for Carlton, this blue zone here. And what we found this week is TDK genuinely really hung behind the ball. He didn't get dragged up forward. And he basically, the top teams play this kind of stopper here. Max Gawn makes it famous. And the aim here isn't to stop anything. Just the presence alone makes an aerial problem because this lead up here from our defensive 50 from their forwards genuinely you find this zone here particularly is the zone that Carlton get killed. What we found this week as well was Carlton really did protect the corridor. And if there's a lot of scenes, particularly on kick-ins, where we've left the man here, just this opposition man here, open on the wings. We left these wings open and flooded these kind of areas here. We really did flood these areas here and left that wing wide open, which is basically making them go the fat side, which gave us a chance to get back. So to answer your question, it's part structure, but it's also a consequence of playing the high press. And the top teams, what they do is they look to protect that one. But great question, and that is the way that Carlton fix it. They look to really open the wings up and allow you to go to the fat side, which is what teams get to us, and we get caught in that, taking the riskier kick. And that is why you saw such a high percentage of our points as well being turnover, because we force that kick. You have to go into the corridor for fast transition, otherwise it's too set up. So great question, and I do think it's a structural thing, but TDK is very king in that for the initial buying the time. The fast dog ass, really simple one. Who comes in for Martin? Does Plowman come straight for Void, who I thought had the best game? Nunes and Lob forming a solid partnership. We know I'm a big fan of Nunesy and Lob, and I think they were brilliant this week. They really allow a bit of options. So because of that, my change would be I'd keep Boyd in and screw Plowman off. I think he deserves a second game. I think he was very brave. He offered the options. With him and Nunes as well, they switched a little bit on that wing as well. Gives that creativity. We know Voss is really looking for that. As for the Martin question, I would be inclined this week to really give Jesse Motlop the chance. I don't think GWS are the type of team that it's going to ruin anything by having that, because I think that with Martin coming out for 2 weeks, I think Motlop just gives us a bit more options and a bit of creativity there. He does play a lot taller than he is, and he does love that JSOS running up and down the wing like Martin does on the other side on that flank. So for me, that would be my one change. I would bring him in. You could even go, if Hewitt, I'd personally rest Hewitt till Sydney. I think he's more needed then. I think that midfield is structured. But that would be my change. That's what I expect to see. Is Cottrell the perfect sub, says Lockegg? I think he is. And I'll tell you for why. What I like about Cottrell is I think the subs, when people start talking about put Motlop as the sub, put Dow as the sub, that is the worst thing in the world, because they are then rested effectively. For their development, they need to be playing weekly. You saw it with Dow. He had a bit of an off week when he had the week off and came back. For me, continuity is the king of what we're trying to build. So I like Cottrell, and I thought he was really good. And to go back to the Nunes and the question about Martin, he could be a potential as well. It gives us a lot more floating options, and then Nunes can play a bit further forward. He took his goal well. So I really like Cottrell as the sub. For me, if I was picking the team, Cottrell and Setfield would be the subs moving forward, along with Boyd, because I don't think you're losing anything. I only think you've got everything to gain by who you've got. Real popular one here. Mark DT, is this the best version of Cripps we've seen? His improvement in goal kicking is immense. Is it too early to think about next level Cripps when we make finals? I don't think it is, Tim, either, mate. And I think you've got a great point. And what we're going to show here is the Tim Clark effect, I call it. 2019 was regarded as the best year for Cripper. And I want you to look at two big things, right? What is the contested percentage? How much of them possessions are contested, right? Is really important. And then the score involvements and the marks inside 50. Now, you saw Nat Fife last year when he was deployed more in a loose role. He was really added a versatility to his game. And this is the Tim Clark effect. He is wonderful with our midfield. And it's no surprise that Cripper was more comfortable when Clarkey was there prior than he was without. And I think one of the things is the trust and the element of it is there now. I think the coaching group now know they've got a lot of boys inside that can do the hard work, and it allows Cripps to be free. And when you see Cripps run forward, he makes that forward line so hard. And we're going to get onto what the forward line is good, and I don't think it's picked up enough, but allowing Cripps to be a bit free. And you see here in his numbers, he's not bogged down in the furnace mold. He's been given a roaming role, and I think for a captain that's essential. But I also think Cripps is very dynamic, and people forget that. So I don't think it's a surprise. I was confident you'd see Cripps back to his best under a right structure. I think that's a huge part, though, of Tim Clark's game and what he brings to the club, because he fulfills these players with a lot of confidence. And you're seeing Cripps now add layers to his game, and that is super exciting. So I think the ceiling is the best player in the league. Someone I could talk about all day, Coy's Blarp says, having only played 50 games, how high do you think Charles' ceiling is? Well, I mean, it's 50 and a bit, isn't it? I think his ceiling could be massive. I stand by this, that I think he is the best forward in the league on his day. I don't think there's anything about him that says to me anyone comes close to him. And I even say he's superior to Harry. And my proof is 2 crumbing goals he scored this week, and he's had about 7 this year as well. He can do what Smalls do. He's quick, he's strong, he's highly athletic. For me, Charlie Curnow, I think could be 100 goals a year player. I think we talk about, can people do that again? There's no one that matches up with him. And you see when he plays people, whether they're a stay-at-home forward or whether they're not, he can match them. And it's because of his work rate. The thing that has impressed me, and Russell needs kudos here, is Charlie's work rate is something we haven't seen forever from Charlie. He always went drifted in and out of games, and he is my favourite player, as we know. But that addition to his game makes him so hard, because he doesn't get smaller, do you know what I mean, as the game goes on. But he still stays that same pace, and genuinely tall players, their engines go. This guy here, he's deadly from the first minute till the last minute. And the fact he's playing from Harry, these two really could be anything. I think both of these could kick 100 goals because it's so hard to stop them. So, to answer your question, I think his ceiling is the limit. I don't think there is a ceiling. I think he could be absolutely dangerous. Tezza from Blue Abroad. He bobs who he wants. Bobs who he wants. Lewis Young. He bobs who he wants. So Douglas and Luke Sinden, good day to you guys. Was extremely frustrated with the amount of entries we made without scoring. Also thinking the umpire seemed a bit sus in the fourth. Lack of holding calls. Spot on. Harry needs to learn to be a bit more theatrical, I think. Particularly, I think he's way too honest and gets on with his job. Luke Sinden, 74, 50 is his equal highest ever recorded. The contested game isn't sustainable. However, you win the centre clearances, it sets you up nicely. Defence looking stronger every week. We have one of the strongest forwards lines. Spot on. Now, to answer Douglas's point, almost half of them, just under half, will repeat forward 50 entries. So for me, that's good. If you're getting a repeat from your inside 50 entries, that's as good as a goal. Because statistics will say, like in life, you bang on a door hard enough, eventually it opens. And for me, watching that, I didn't mind it, because we really made them resort to them panic kicks and them rush kicks, and eventually it took its toll. That will refine a little bit. I think that will refine a little bit. I think also when we bring Motlop in, I can see a world where Motlop, Owens and Durden are in the same forward line. I really do think that will be the future of this club, and then we have a floater through there, and that's when Cripps is really strong. I think Cripps will eventually take that. I think it's going to be a tough call, but I think Martin being injured makes it easy. But I like it. They're refining it, because now these inside 50s as well aren't from the Teague game plan, which is just to get the I-50 numbers in. They're deep, and when they're shallow, they're with purpose. There is a purpose to Carlton's entries, and that is important. Their forward press is starting to get refined, and the way they defend transition is starting to come on. So I think that is a huge thing. And like Luke says here, it's a great point. The centre clearances does, and the fact that it was almost 50-50 this week from stoppage and clearance work and defensive transition and turnover from our points, 50%, that is huge, because that means you've got a well-rounded game plan. So now suddenly you're starting to see the layers that when your flags come in. Very early doors, obviously, but at the moment, that's a good sign that we've done it to 2 crap sides. Do you know what I mean? That do play with a little bit of heart, because that means it's building. Once you've done it the first time, it should be easy to repeat. Gets a bit harder the next 2 weeks, but this stands us in good stead, because you want to see 74 inside 50s, because that's going to be about 50 against GWS. So that is a good marking there, that we've got the transition game going. But first use is always important. Chris Wright, who in the midfield would make way for George Hewitt? Is he okay to play next week? Marchbank going okay in the VFL now, isn't he? Well, Marchbank, let's touch on him. He was sensational. Went off in the 4th. Absolute blinding game. Probably had about 7-8 of them disposals, which were high from kick-ins, but the kick-ins were very good. big thing about Marchbank is just watching that. His read on the ball and his ability and his mobility doesn't seem affected. And we get excited by Mitch McGovern, but I'm telling you, Marchbank is 10 times the player Mitch McGovern is down back. So 2 weeks of this, they've got the bye coming up. Probably 2 more games in the VFL he needs for me to get him into the first team. So probably when our fixtures get really tough, we should start to see Marchbank back. That could be key. George Hewitt's an interesting one because I think Carlton looked a lot more dual-paced because of their players. So I could see a forward, or I could see Nick Newman coming out for George Hewitt and giving another rotation. I think the secret of this is rotation. And because Hewitt then gives you that option, you've got to remember, he played 90% of game time for Sydney down the back on the half-back flank as a defensive tagger, and then went into the midfield in the second half of the year. I think that's an important thing with Hewitt. And I think suddenly that gives us a few options. It gives us some point of differences down back and gives us a lot of rotation, which to play this game plan, rotation is king, as we've seen in stoppages, which we'll come to a bit later. But, great question, Chris. Grand Spice to me, old mate. He asked a few questions. We picked this one out though. Cottrell is impressed. O'Brien has to stay. We have so much depth, and that is important. The amount of players that we've got now in rotation in these midfield and these smaller positions is really key. And then you've got like Williamson, who had a real poor game in the VFL. It's got to be said in the fourth. But he's another guy, and it keeps that pressure. And it's no surprise for me that you're seeing O'Brien really stand out and Nunes, because the pressure is coming below them, which is really important. And they offer natural width. For me, O'Brien was brilliant. Cottrell, when he came on, was sensational. And it was the first time I've seen him play that VFL role that I know and love from him. He was really intentful, and I really enjoyed it. So for me, yes, the depth is key. It puts pressure on it, keeps players honest. So good question. It's the first time. And down the back, if Marchbank gets fit, suddenly that pressure comes into the team. But also that pressure from having no depth suddenly disapparates. So really good question, and it is something that's really a delight. So BB, who comes in for Owies Pommy? Simply not good enough. Also, did we look back without Jay Martin being subbed? Big contract for a little return. The Jay Martin thing, I agree with you. I think, for me, that role can be handed to a different person. And you saw Nunes go and play that role. Cottrell played across half forward. And that's why I'm thinking Motlop may come in. Purely because he likes to play that high half forward role, even though he's smaller than the average bear. Gives you a different point of difference. And that energy and that creativity was really poignant from Cottrell in the fourth. It bailed us out of a few situations. As for Owies, I think Owies gets a lot of stick, and I'm going to tell you why. PeterV asks, accumulating 9 tackles but not scoring enough goals. Let's take a look at that. So, it's interesting. On the left here, you've got the guys who played the majority of the roles in these problem forward positions of Richmond, right? And they're most tacklers, so sorted by that. So you've got Butler, Rioli, Rewalt, Castagna and Lloyd. And you look here, they're inside 50 tackles and they're goals. Then you look at Carlton. Matty Owies, do you know what I mean? 2.1 tackles, Corey Durden. And it's important that Dimmer said that his small forwards weren't there to kick goals. They were there to lay the pressure and the foundations. And them goals came from everyone else. And if you look at Richmond, they didn't have the spread of goals from their key positions like Carlton do. Harry and Charlie miles ahead. And that's not going to change because it's always going to be a tall forwards day in every game because it's impossible to hold them down. You've got to remember 2017 Richmond just had Jack Rewalt as the tall. They floated Caddy up there and Grigg when they needed to. So then you look at Carlton and you see here everyone in the one category in the tackles inside 50. And an interesting one there, goals coming from midfield. But Cripps going up there. So I think Cripps could become J-Mart with a rotation, another rotation when Hewitt comes back. And suddenly you've got a huge rotation in that forward line. And that's what Richmond did really well. So I think Durden and Owies, them goals will come. You look, Owies there, just 0.8. He's going to be like our Dan Butler type player. But he doesn't play as deep as Butler. You've got to remember that. So I think that's really important there. That Durden has got them tackle numbers that Butler did. Doesn't quite have the goals. That's why I think maybe a J-Mart may come out and a Motlop will come in because they are natural goal sneaks themselves. Motlop is very similar to Butler in how he moves in the VFL if you watch it. So stay tuned for that. That's my prediction. Bearmonger, me old mate, how you doing? Pom, what your thoughts on sets? I can't see him getting in the back of the team. And if Gov can finish the year off with 5 or 6 games in a row, I think it's time to move him on. Could be, and I think Marchbank will have a big part in that. I think if Marchbank gets in there with the big contract and stuff, be a bit of trade bait. And if Carlton maybe sneak and think, you know what, we might pay 200k of your salary. That could be an option for Carlton to rub their hands with it. And someone else may think, as quite often in the AFL, a lot of these list managers are very arrogant. They put their faith in players that they can change them round. Setterfield, I can't see a place for him because he's neither good enough for me inside or outside to warrant a place. And I think players have gone ahead of him. Setterfield is going to be one of them guys that I think he's going to suffer from VFL rotation and the fact that a lot of second, third rounders next year in the draft are that outside position, which Carlton may have a sniff at. I think with the advantation of Cowell, with O'Brien's form, the fact Nunes is there, and Nunes will have to be replaced in the next year or so, depending on how Williamson goes, it may be the end of Setterfield's career. But great question, and I think you may have seen the last of Setterfield. Tim W, good day to you, mate. As always, a great question. We seem to be scoring much better from stoppages. Was there anything different in how we set up, we noticed? Well, there was actually, and we'll go to my wonderful little area. So what I want to show you here is Carlton here, the red of the opposition. They actually played an extra down the back. And the reason is Carlton genuinely go behind here, and then you quite often see a handball through the centre of it here, and Carlton kind of feed their way out with tight handballs. Now, what this caused is actually a spare out the back, and what we saw here was this gentleman here just hit a direct run. So what they did from that was that allowed Carlton very quickly to really come through this area here really fast and at pace. But it also allowed Carlton to, from these areas, to come like here. So if I just get rid of that. So this guy here just ran through and took the handball. So this handball came out the back. And it allowed us to set up play away from the contest. So Carlton in the stoppages this week really looked to hit up these little areas here, around here with their stoppage motion. So they were really a different type setup where genuinely we have two in front of the ball. We actually saw that they played the extra there to stop that man and moved him actually back behind the ball and looked to do the runner. And that is because of the makeup of our midfield. We had a lot more guys that could run as opposed to smash and bash. So Kennedy played that Hewitt role. And another big noticeable thing in the stoppages was the massive rotation. Usually the 6 or 7 guys we have around centre clearances are the guys that work around. And you saw this week Lewis Young taking the rucks down the back. You saw Harry Mackay. You saw Curnow in the forward ruck taps. And different rotations. Fisher using the forward rotation down the back. Sard and Doc were quite often the on-ball pair. And then Cripps played over the ground outside of 50 and a lot of the defensive 50 motions in the stoppages. And that is a huge change around for Carlton because them rotations keep these bigger blokes fresh and also give us a little bit more dynamic movement with the ball. So great question, Tim. That was my observations. And definitely check it out in the third. It's really noticeable, the rotations and how Carlton alleviated that one man extra that Adelaide were playing around stoppages. Jaru, good day to you, mate. What's happened to Walsh? Every time he gets it, he turns it over or gets tackled. It's a great question, this, and it is one that is probably noticeable for the Carlton fraternity that players have struggled. He hasn't been impactful. But you've got to remember where Walshy is coming from. Walshy is coming from a real high ceiling. The biggest noticeable change for Walsh this year, as opposed to last year, is he's playing a lot more inside. He's been a lot more of the set-up play. Very akin to a Tom Mitchell role. This guy now is looking to use the ball, and that's because of Cerra. And I think that him and Cerra are starting to get a bit of synergy. You've got to remember he's coming from a bit of an injury as well. Am I worried? No, not at all. But I do think his role has changed. And I do think, as we've been talking about in this, as the team formulates, I could see him getting a little bit more half-forward time and getting the ball outside. You saw that a few times just outside of 50 this week. So I'm not worried about Walsh. His numbers are still elite. He's still looking solid. Still a very good footballer. Just think his role's changed, and I think you're starting to see the B graders step up, which is also taken away from his role. So I'm not concerned. I just think at the moment he's just trying to find his place, and I think eventually, like a long season, you'll have peaks and troughs from all the players. Zach Fisher, does he play better when we're playing better, or do we play better when he's playing better? I think he's a big part, and I don't want to use the term downhill skier because I think that's unfair, but he is a kind of player that I expect when things are going well, he's your icing. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of players in the Carlton list that cop a little bit of shit. Wingers are the big one. Wingers only play well when you play well, when you have the ball. Otherwise, they're pointless, really. They just are running up and down the wing and creating width and stuff like that and impacting the game that way. Fisher does a lot of work, and you saw him this week playing in the stoppages on the ball, having a bit of energy. He was really good. I think Fisher is a key. I just think Fisher stands out more when Jack Martin's not there because Jack Martin's that big name and you focus on him. Zach Fisher plays that role, in my opinion, better than Jack Martin does. And I will be ploughing my time into him. Zach Fisher is a very potent footballer when he gets in and around the game. So for me, I think he's good. It's the chicken and the egg argument, like you say, Faz. But I think he is a player that when you play well, icing on the cake type footballer.